I think we can start. I see the majority of people are already here. So first of all, good morning, everyone, once again. And thank you for joining today's webinar on collaboration with Africa in research and innovation. So my name is Tadas Tumėnas, and I'm the head of Lithuanian RDI Liaison office in Brussels. I will be the moderator of today's webinar. And before we dive in, I would like to remind you about a few housekeeping rules. So please keep yourself muted. And if you have some questions, so don't hesitate, to write them in the chat. This is the third webinar in our series organized by Lithuanian RDI Liaison office in Brussels, the NCBR office in Brussels, Slovenian Business and Research Association, as well as with Eötvös Loránd University and Corvinus University of Budapest. And we are delighted to have you with us as we continue exploring our global opportunities in the Horizon Europe. For those who haven't seen our previous episodes, so we had one webinar on collaboration with South Korea. Then we had the second one focusing on Canada, and today is Africa's turn. So before we dive into today's topic and introduce our speakers, I'd like to give the floor to my colleagues, our co-organizers, who will welcome you in their native language. This has been our long-standing tradition, so please, without further ado, I'm passing the floor to Ivona. Ivona?
Thank you, Tadas. Good morning, everyone, and thank you Tadas for moderating this webinar. Thank you all for joining, and now I will switch to Polish to greet you. Nazywam się Iwona Klich-Królikowska i reprezentuję Narodowe Centrum Badań i Rozwoju w Brukseli. Jeśli chodzi o relacje Polski i Afryki, to nigdy nie było one szczególnie rozbudowane, ale mam nadzieję, że dzięki eventom, takim webinarom, takim jak ten, to może się zmienić. Witam wszystkich i życzę owocnej dyskusji. And now I will hand over to my colleague Marco. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivona. Dear guests, my name is Marko Šetins, and I would like to wish a very warm welcome to everyone in the name of the Slovenian Business and Research Association. Dragi gostje, moje ime je Marko Šetins in posebej toplo dobrodošlico v imenu Slovenskega gospodarskega in raziskovalnega združenja bi rad danes zaželel posebej tistim, ki ste se nam pridružili iz Slovenije. Najlepša hvala. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning. My name is Orsi Alugmayer, and I represent two Hungarian universities from Budapest, Eötvös University and Corvinus University of Budapest. We are very happy to join us today. This is our third webinar, and we think that you might find it useful before the next call of the Horizon Europe program in Cluster 2, which will be published soon. So please use this opportunity to ask questions to the speakers. You can use the chat, and we have a question and answer session as well. We wish you a fruitful discussion and hope it contribute to your preparation in the next round of Horizon Europe course. Szeretettel üdvözlöm a kollégáimat, főleg Magyarországról, Budapestről két egyetemet képviselek itt Brüsszelben, az Eötvös Tudományegyetemet és a Corvinus Egyetemet. Nagyon örülünk, hogy ilyen sokan csatlakoztak, nagyon sokan regisztráltak erre a webinár sorozatra, és azt gondoljuk, hogy ez igenis hasznos lehet önöknek, hogy felkészüljenek a következő pályázati felhívásokra, amelyek hamarosan megjelennek majd, és nagyon reméljük, hogy ez egy jó alkalom arra, hogy kérdéseket intézzenek a résztvevőkhöz, és reméljük, hogy informatívnak és hasznosnak találják az előadásokat. But I switch to English again, and I give the floor to Tadas.
Actually, to my colleague Agne. Agne,
Sorry.
please.
Sorry.
Thank you all. So good morning. My name is Agne Dromelite, and I work as a policy analyst at the Lithuanian Liaison office. And I am also very happy to welcome everyone to this webinar. It's very important that Europe and Africa strengthen their collaboration, and especially it's great that we as widening countries make this webinar, because Eastern Europe, I think, needs to be more involved with Africa relations. And now I will greet everyone in Lithuanian. Labas rytas visiems. Mano vardas Agnė Drumelytė, aš dirbu politikos analitikė LINO biure Briuselėje ir džiaugiamės, kad dalyvaujate šiame webinare, nes kalbėsime apie Europos ir Afrikos bendradarbiavimą ir keičiantis pasauliui tikriausiai labai svarbu stiprinti Europos ir Afrikos bendradarbiavimą ir ypač malonu, kad Rytų Europos šalys irgi domisi šio bendradarbiavimu. Now, dabar aš vėl kalbėsiu angliškai, so I will hand over now back to Tadas, the moderator, and enjoy the webinar, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues, for this nice introduction. So we kind of kept our still rule going. So now I would like to turn to our speakers, and I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Paul Davis. So he is a regional director for Europe at University of Bristol. So Paul, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I will just share my screen and the slides.
We can see it, just not in the full mode yet.
There we go.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak this morning about the Africa Charter for Transformative Research Collaborations on behalf of colleagues from the University of Bristol and specifically the Paravoli Africa Research Centre. I'm going to talk a little bit less about specific opportunities under Horizon Europe, but more about a way of thinking about and implementing collaboration with Africa, which can, of course, apply to Horizon Europe projects as well. We started with the last slide, so I'll go back to the beginning. Okay. So the Africa Charter was launched nearly 2 years ago now, in July 2023, at the AAU Biennial Conference in Windhoek in Namibia. And it is an Africa-centered framework for advancing a transformative mode of research collaboration. So as a framework, it's very much a living document. It's a work in progress. So it's been published, but it's something which is constantly evolving as more and more stakeholders become involved in the Charter's activities. And it has a very clear aim, which is to advance and uphold the African continent's place in the global production of scientific knowledge. The significance of the Charter, I think, lies in the fact that it is very much led from the continent and centres on the continent of Africa. So it was facilitated by the University of Bristol, together with the University of South Africa and the University of Cape Town. But it was co-created by a number of Africa's major higher education stakeholders. And you can see them listed on the slide here. They include ARUA, so colleagues from ARUA who will speak next may also say a few words about the Charter, which they're very familiar with and very actively engaged in. It's something which chimes very well with the University of Bristol's wider objectives and focus on social justice, on its global civic mission, and on its activities around reparative futures. The starting point for the Charter was very much the recognition that Africa's position in the global science system is very imbalanced. It's deeply unfavorable at both an individual and an institutional level. So, for example, a very tiny fraction of scientific publications and indeed researchers come from Africa. And many of Africa's universities are not as well positioned as they might be in the world rankings. So the Charter is about trying to give African individuals and also institutions will put them in their rightful place in the global scientific system. This situation is neither accidental nor harmless. It reflects many layers of power imbalance in the way that scientific knowledge is produced. And this stems from the colonial history and colonial past. So there's a risk that this will have a greater impact, not just on scientific knowledge production, but it will have negative repercussions on the way in which, on repercussions for Africa's economic and political prospects. So this is about, of course, changing the way research is done, but also having a rebalancing effect on the overall economic, political, and indeed scientific system. So research partnerships are very much an entry point and a leverage point to try and bring about wider systemic change, which can help us collectively tackle some of the major societal and global challenges which we face in these current times. The Charter's organized around two different strands. The first is 10 principles, which set out how research collaboration needs to be configured or reconfigured. And that starts at probably the most obvious level, looking at how concrete research partnerships and collaborations are arranged. But it also seeks, as I've mentioned, to address and redress these multiple layered and deeply layered power imbalances which exist at the moment in the production of scientific knowledge between Africa and the rest of the world. So it addresses 6 elements. I mentioned concrete collaboration arrangements, but also looks at institutional resourcing, the development frame, theories, concepts, language, and epistemologies. The second strand is focused on aspirations, and the Charter sets out or articulates 6 aspirations for change in policy, in guidelines, and in regulatory frameworks. And it recognizes that a number of stakeholders need to be involved in this process and need to bring about the change which is necessary. So that includes universities themselves, university networks or higher education networks, funders, policymakers, research assessment bodies, publishers, all of the different stakeholders who are involved in the production of global scientific knowledge. And this is really necessary to ensure that the transformative mode of collaboration which the Charter aspires to is implemented, is established, and becomes best and standard practice across Africa and the rest of the world. We're delighted that the Charter over the last nearly 2 years has been very well received by the global academic community and further afield. A big coalition or community of interested stakeholders has gathered around the Charter. And today, more than 100 organizations have signed up to endorse and support the principles and aspirations that it sets out. These include major university networks, universities themselves, and some of the other stakeholders I just mentioned, such as publishers, assessment bodies, and others from particularly Africa, but Europe, North and Latin America. So a large coalition of interested stakeholders is building and actively contributing to the Charter's further development. So looking more to the future and what's next, the Charter's lead institutions, so the facilitating organizations, the University of Bristol, University of Cape Town and University of South Africa, are coordinating and developing 4 different strands of activities which are already being rolled out and will continue over the coming months and years across the different geographical areas concerned by the Charter. They include a critical review of current policy and practice against the principles of the Charter. So they're looking very much at where there are promising approaches developing, but where there are gaps and where there are challenges which need addressing. And then there's a big strand of work which is underway, but will be increasingly developed over the coming years, connected to knowledge exchange, joint learning, and undertaking the continued intellectual debate which is necessary to further develop the Charter and make it as impactful as possible. Last year, we held an event in Brussels in November, which brought together over 100 research and innovation stakeholders from Europe and Africa to discuss the principles and aspirations which it sets out. It was a very positive event in terms of generating increased engagement in the Charter itself, but also identifying potential avenues for its further development in the future. Later on this year, colleagues will be rolling out a web platform, which will be dedicated to the Africa Charter, and it will provide a space to gather various tools together, which will enable the community, the coalition of interested parties to pursue their activities around the Charter and to pursue its development. And it will also set out more detailed information on what it means to be a signatory to the Charter. So if that's something which may be of interest to you, I would encourage you to look out for the launch of this web platform later on this year before the summer. Just in brief, there's some more information on the website. Signatories at the moment are encouraged to publicize their endorsement, their support for the Charter, to champion it internally, to engage in the further development of the Charter with the other stakeholders who have endorsed it, and also to gradually undertake a review of their own internal policy and practice and see how it can be adapted to reflect the principles and aspirations and bring about more equitable, more transformative research collaboration between Africa and the rest of the world. So that's a brief introduction to the Africa Charter. I hope that was useful. There's a lot more information available on the website, which is on the slide now. The slides, I believe, will be circulated, so you will be able to hopefully click on there and look at information about past, current, and future activities. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions I can after this webinar, or indeed to connect you to colleagues in Bristol and in the partner organizations who are working on the Charter on a daily basis. So thanks very much for your attention, and looking forward to the other presentations and to the discussion afterwards.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for this good overview of Africa Charter. And now I would like to invite our two other speakers. So African Research University Network, Johnny Giapong, who is the Secretary General, and his colleague, Emmanuel Abbey. So please, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
So good morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Emmanuel will be making the presentation on behalf of ARUA, and after that we'll be happy to have the discussions with you all.
I'm sorry, there is a bit of an echo. I don't know if you are both in the same room, so perhaps one of you should close the microphone.
Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Please, go ahead.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's much better.
Okay,
go
right.
ahead.
So I will ask Emmanuel to go ahead and introduce ARUA, after which we can take the discussions forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen perfectly.
Right. So for the well, I think there's a feedback. I'm not sure where it's coming from. So the past 10, 15 years, we've seen a significant change in the space of international development cooperation. What that meant for Africa was that now the actors in the field now have become diversified. It was possible for earlier we saw North-South collaborations dominating, but with this new development, what we are seeing now is a lot of South-South collaborations going on. And what that means is that there's opportunity for local ownership of knowledge, there's the opportunity for mutual benefit and inclusivity where all actors are able to play a part. And I think Paul kind of made a very good introduction to that. So let me just go straight to how the African Research Universities Alliance itself was formed. So there were a few vice chancellors who met, and then they saw that the contribution of African researchers to global knowledge production was just insignificant. For more than 10 years, this is around 2015, for more than 10 years, they saw that the contribution of African researchers to global knowledge production was less than 1%. Africans were not working with themselves, were not working together, and there's a huge imbalance. So the vice chancellors that came together felt that, well, no single university in Africa was in the capacity to make a huge difference when it comes to knowledge production. And then the trend towards collaborative effort is where we should be heading towards. So these 16 vice chancellors then agreed that there was the need to form this African Research Universities Alliance. The vision behind the whole enterprise was, let us strengthen African universities through effective capacity building that comes from working together with a view to significantly increase research output that is coming from Africa. And the way to do that is about African researchers and institutions working together so that they can transform the African continent. So African Research University Alliance was formed in 2015. And when it was formed in 2015, we had 16 universities coming together to work together to make an effort when it comes to increasing significantly the type of research that is coming from Africa. Currently, we are made up of 20 full-time members and then 3 associate universities. So we are spread across the entire African continent, a lot of them from the southern part. So 6 universities from South Africa, 1 from Mauritius. In the Eastern Horn, we have Tanzania, Nairobi, Ethiopia, and West Africa. We have mainly from Ghana and Nigeria. And then we have 1 member also from Senegal, and then UMCSP. That's an associate member. So when the network was formed, we decided to align our thematic themes in 4 areas. One is enhanced research, and this very much ties into our goal to increase significantly the type of research that is done from the African continent. And the second pillar is to expand and improve graduate training. And there's a history behind this, because if you look at the African continent, there was, for a long time, the emphasis was on undergraduate training, and there was the need to continue the pipeline so that we enhance significantly graduate training on the continent. So that's basically what led ARUA to focus on this second goal. Then the third one is about professionalized research management, and then the fourth one is institutional research advocacy. So this is how ARUA understands research partnership. ARUA's model is that it should be about co-creation. It shouldn't be one person leading the front, but people coming together and co-creating the agenda of what should be done to transform the African continent. It's about equity, and it's about mutual benefit. It is about respect for diverse knowledge. It is about significantly enhancing capacity building and owning the knowledge. It's about data sharing, and it's about ensuring that this is sustainable so that we don't go back to the earlier paradigm where there was that form of imbalance. Everybody must be involved. So that's basically how ARUA understands research partnerships, and that's mainly the reason why we endorse the African Charter also, because these pillars kind of align very much with what the African Charter is all about. To be able to demonstrate the model that ARUA was building, one of the very first things ARUA did was to come up with these 13 centers of research, centers of excellence. So we're grateful to the UKRI through the GCRF fund to have provided it with a grant to be able to build these 13 centers of excellence. And we were fortunate because they allowed we Africans to be able to determine what we want to use the fund to do. So what we agreed to do was to do something around the SDGs. So just to show you all these centers, we have one on water, Rhodes University, one on energy, one on non-communicable diseases, materials and nanotechnology, climate change, food security, post-conflict societies, good governance, notions of identity, poverty and inequality, unemployment and skills development, urbanization and habitable cities, and then migration and mobility. So those are our centers of excellence, that they are mainly based in our member universities. And let me just explain the model behind these centers of excellence. We decided to adopt a hub and spoke model. What the hub and spoke model means is that one particular university leads, and then the center is operated around between 4 to 5 other spoke universities. The idea is that not all the universities are equal when it comes to their strength in executing the agenda, the ARUA mandate. Not all the universities are equal. So one who is probably the best or has a much higher strength should lead and work with other between 4 to 5 universities. The key benefit here is that because of the model, operations are streamlined, there's efficiency, and more importantly, we are facilitating growth so that at the point, all the universities that vary in terms of strength can become more or less, there's some form of equity in terms of their strength, in terms of how they can pursue the ARUA agenda. So that's about the Centers of Excellence. But in 2019, ARUA and then the Guild of European Universities entered into this nice collaboration. Our idea is let's strengthen the African Knowledge Society by putting research and innovation at the heart of any other partnership we form. This wonderful collaboration happened to be just around the time that the AU-EU innovation agenda is also being discussed. And we think this collaboration is a very beautiful example of how the AU-EU innovation agenda can be executed. So the two institutions decided to enter into a long-term equitable research collaboration that places African science capacity building at the core of the relationship. More importantly, one of the things that we tried to do was to come up with this thing called the clusters of research excellence, which is more or less a model very similar to what we have as our centers of excellence. But the good thing about these clusters of research excellence is that it creates opportunities for African universities to gain coordinated access to facilities in European universities, and also for European universities to gain coordinated access to the facilities and human resources on the African continent. It's an opportunity where there's a creation of knowledge between Africa and Europe. And more importantly for us, it removes the incentives of brain drain, because now and then we get to hear most African postgraduate students interested in going to Europe and they never really come back. So this initiative is one that will kind of curb the problem of brain drain. I know the slides will be shared, but just to let you know that we came up with 21 clusters of research excellence in the AU-EU innovation. That aligns very much with the AU-EU innovation agenda. So there's one on public health, there's another one on green transition, one on innovation and technology, and then capacity for sciences. So let me just say that the way forward for the ARUA dream is to be able to transform the African continent significantly. So the plan is, how do we tackle the region's most significant problems? I mean, there are a lot. I just mentioned a few here. You know, there are problems with unemployment, there are problems with structural transformation, there are problems with poverty. So the whole idea is, how do we solve this through research? So the ARUA dream is at the end to be able to come up with this thing we call the African University. This African University is not a physical university, but the idea behind it is about resource sharing. We'll have the same universities that we have on the continent, but it should be possible for one researcher from one or student from one university to be able to gain uncoordinated access to another university, gain access to their libraries, and that is the whole dream behind the ARUA model. We want to make our researchers globally competitive. We want to go beyond the less than 1% contribution to global knowledge and increase that significantly so that Africans become very visible. We want to enhance PhD education. We want to build early career researcher programs and make them very, very, very solid so that Africans can contribute much to global knowledge space. I know the next speaker, who is from the Guild, will also speak a little bit more about this wonderful collaboration between Africa and Europe. On that note, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you for shedding some light on African Research Universities Network. I think it was useful for our participants. And so last but not least, I would like to invite Sean Rowlands, Senior Policy Officer from the Guild. So Sean, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just bear with me when I share my screen. Okay, can you, wait, sorry. Is that
yes, we can see it, perfect.
Just a moment. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I'm, as my colleague Emmanuel just mentioned, I'm going to very much build on the excellent introduction that him and Professor Japong have just provided, and I think it is very much in line with the presentation that Paul gave as well. We're all very much trying to address similar issues in the global science in the global science context, but I'm going to maybe focus a little bit more. First, I'll introduce a little bit about the Guild and about how we've been carrying out advocacy for Africa-Europe collaboration. But I'm going to finish off by getting very focused on how these clusters work and how you can engage with them with funding opportunities from the European programs. So briefly to start about the Guild, we were founded in 2016, so just 1 year younger than Arua. And from an early stage, international cooperation and cooperation with Africa has been an important strategic focus of our member institutions. And as we've been invited by by co-organizers from widening countries, I thought I would highlight that from an early stage, our membership has been very much highly with great involvement from widening countries, from institutions in Slovenia, Hungary, Poland, and Estonia. And as we go along, I'll be able to show how these countries have also been engaging in the Africa-Europe clusters of research excellence that Emmanuel just introduced. So I'm very pleased to say that the networks of Arua and the Guild have been working together for some time now. And this really culminated in where this picture was taken when the launch of the clusters of research excellence really became something that put our partnership into practice. There are quite a few similarities in our networks in terms of the size that they are, the focus on research-intensive, comprehensive institutions, but of course there's plenty of differences as well due to the fact that every institution is different, and also the European and the African continent have very big differences. But where we've been able to find lots of common ground, we've been able to come up with quite a few strong statements over the last few years together. When you get the slides later on, you'll be able to click on this information to find out more. This is partly because we recognize that there had to be a voice for universities putting forward the messages that Emmanuel just explained, and also from the European perspective, talking about the importance of being able to address shared challenges like climate change, about the fact that excellent research really requires collaboration with our colleagues in Africa. There's been a lot of similar positions there, where and this was happening, as Emmanuel mentioned, at the time when the EU innovation agenda was being developed. So it was adopted in 2023, pretty much around the same time that the clusters of research excellence were launched, and also the Africa Charter was launched. And I think it is really worth pausing for a moment to recognize that this is really quite a groundbreaking agreement between the high-level governments of the African Union and the European Union. In the previous events that have been in this webinar series, we would have heard from associated countries of South Korea and Canada. Of course, associating to the program is a really important part of international cooperation, but the AU Innovation Agenda works in a slightly different way, and I'll explain how that affects the funding opportunities a bit later. But it really is quite a massive undertaking. 2 continents have come together working over a long period of time through kind of diplomatic areas to decide on 4 collaboration areas where there is an understanding of a kind of co-programmed set of research priorities. These 4 areas here: public health, innovation and technology, green transition, and capacities for science. This is a framework for funding on both continents and for objectives in the short, medium, and long term, which basically creates a pathway for collaboration between the 2 continents, and also for better kind of flourishing of research and innovation on each continent between partners in these important topics. It has some really great guiding principles, which Arua and the Guild were part of the stakeholder groups that were feeding into. And it promises, well, it has the potential for quite a lot of opportunities. And at the moment, I will be focusing on those opportunities in Horizon Europe, which are one of the kind of earliest outcomes of this AU-EU innovation agenda. But before I get to those funding opportunities, I wanted to kind of just go into a bit more practical detail about how these clusters of research excellence work. They are really quite broad in each of their consortia. You can see here there's about 120 institutions in total across 42 countries in Africa, Europe, and beyond. And this initiative has already been recognized by the African Union and the European Union on their dashboard of initiatives. So we're really pleased to have been recognized that the funding coming from the institutions to establish and underpin the cluster's work has already been recognized as a contribution towards the innovation agenda that I just mentioned. There are a few different features that were kind of developed by ARUA and the Guild, and academics were expected to fall within this broad kind of pattern. Scientific excellence, I think, is one to really highlight here, but I don't really have time to go into all of these details. Many of these ideas and concepts were already discussed in the previous presentations. But I think it's really important to bear in mind that scientific excellence is really driving this as well. This isn't necessarily just for the value and transformative possibilities of collaboration for its own sake. It's also for the sake of excellence that requires that kind of collaboration. And so what is a cluster? Just in a very brief sense, it is a group of academics working together in a multilateral basis with academic leadership. So there's co-leadership in Africa and in Europe, at least one in each continent, but sometimes there's two or three. It's a kind of slightly larger leadership group. And this means that that there's not a bilateral basis, which can sometimes be risk breaking if there's a change in funding strategies. This is a way to be resilient by joining together. So in a sense, that kind of mirrors the way that ARUA and the Guild have become stronger by becoming a network of universities. But these are the academics that are doing that. It also has a fundamentally intercontinental and intracontinental characteristics. So it's very important that we're working between Africa and Europe, but it's also very important that Africa-Africa collaboration is happening, and also Europe and Europe collaboration is happening. We know that there are still barriers of collaboration between European countries, and that might not always be across the board, but there are certain specific areas that need to be strengthened. And we at the Guild think that's really important as well, which is why we've tried to be involved in this initiative as broadly as possible across Europe as well. Another aspect of it is that these clusters have a plan which integrate research, innovation activities, and education activities. Those education activities, for example, relate to PhD programs. Research can be collaborative, it can be sometimes more fellowship-based. Innovation is really about the relationship we have with businesses, with our societies, to be able to have an impact from the work that we're doing. And it's really important, I think, that this initiative, although being done with the funding and the design of academics and institutions, kind of from a bottom-up basis, has been consciously aligned with the top high-level political priorities that have been set in the innovation agenda. And finally, I think this is also very important. I think it's really worth recognizing and celebrating that the fact that institutions have been involved from the very beginning. So there's a lot of talent in Europe and Africa, but they need the ecosystem to be able to thrive. And the fact that the institutions have been standing by these academics in their collaboration is partly to make it work, it's in recognizing some of the challenges that there have been, but it's also because these institutions need to be strengthened by collaboration. It can't be something that leads to a continuation of the problems that I think Paul mentioned and also Emmanuel did as well. And so this is where, for example, the commitment to equity is very important. I think this has been covered quite a bit, so I'll move along quite quickly. Last year, we had a wonderful conference where, in practice, in person, our academics came together. It was a really large gathering where ideas were discussed and really specific plans for proposals, for projects, for collaboration were being put into place among the academics members. Many of them had met before already, but this was an opportunity for us to meet as a large initiative together. We were very grateful to be hosted by the Arua member institution at Stellenbosch in South Africa. And as was already mentioned, then there are now 21 clusters in place. These are all aligned with the AUE Innovation Agenda, and we really encourage anyone who's interested in doing collaboration between Europe and Africa to consider all of these groupings of excellent researchers as potential collaborators. None of these clusters are expected to work hermetically without connection to other academics. This is really a resource for any researcher interested in doing work in these broad fields to find potential collaborators, to see if there's something that you can join. There's many projects that are being led by these clusters, but there are also early career researchers, established researchers, many different ways in which you can collaborate. And I'll show you how you can get in touch with them very soon. You can see how the institution is spread across the 2 continents here. And from our first year, we're already seeing a lot of activity in terms of funding applications, events, and even publications being written as we speak. We've even seen in the first year that there's already been plenty of funding applications, and you can see that the diversification, the diversified approach that we've discussed just now is already starting to show itself in the different kinds of funding opportunities that these clusters are able to attract or at least apply for because of the diversity of their composition. And so in terms of funding opportunities, we encourage our clusters to lead on their own basis, to look for funding according to their needs. One of the key parts that we think that we've got greater potential for success rates, but also for better equity, is that these clusters have been planning their proposals and their action plan for quite some time. They're not just kind of rushing for a deadline as and when it comes out. So in terms of European funding programs, which is not all of the kinds of funding that can happen, and national funding is also very important. For example, Horizon Europe, Erasmus, and the Global Gateway are very important. I'll focus a little bit more on Horizon Europe today. We are all looking forward to the 2025 work program to coming out. There are specific calls within that work program that are earmarked for collaboration with Africa. In fact, we've seen in the last few years that many funding opportunities require a minimum number of African organizations to be eligible for funding. This is one of our key targets, and the clusters are always looking for the opportunities to engage with that. And indeed, the AUE Innovation Agenda is one of the key programming inputs to the Africa initiative. So the kind of bodies that have been developing that are also constantly developing new calls as well with the research with DG RTD. That means that we are seeing opportunities that are very in line with the aspirations and objectives that these clusters have. And alongside that, there's also, we are explaining and building capacity and building understanding of how Africa-Europe collaboration can happen also in Pillar 1, in the bottom-up calls, where academics can choose their topics. So particularly with the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, this is very important because they are so collaborative, but also with the opportunity for European research councils, either in teams working under a European PI, or even in building out the the African participation in the ERC Synergy Grant. And then alongside that, there's also very important partnerships, for example, the EDCTP3. So how can you engage? Please get in touch with us. I think I might just change my sharing just to give you a quick look at our website, just because I think it's very useful for you to know that. Sorry, just bear with me, Tadas. I'll be there in a second. This is a website where you can learn a lot more about our initiative, but I want to really focus on the fact that, for example, if you were interested in one of the clusters that's co-led by Jagiellonian University in Poland, you would be able to click on the information here, see an abstract of the work that they're doing, and you can contact the academics that are leading this cluster in Africa and Europe directly, including Tomasz Guzik at the Jagiellonian University. You can find out about the entire list of academics involved to understand in more detail what they're doing. You can see where everybody's based, and you can also follow them on their own specific social media. So there's plenty of opportunities to find ways to collaborate with us. We've already been well established, and you'll find that there's already a lot of work there that maybe you'll be able to support and contribute to. So we really do recommend that you do get in touch with us. And if you've ever got more questions, you can also get in touch with our networks as well. We've got plenty of social media to follow from both sides of Arua and the Guild, and you can find them through these QR codes as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean, for providing also practical examples, where to find the opportunities, where to find your future partners, basically. So I think it was very useful, because I see that even in the chat, we have one question saying that the presentations today were quite useful, but did not fully address how we can collaborate or foster collaboration effectively. So I think, Sean, you just kind of, with your example, kind of mentioned how to basically collaborate and how to reach out, to the African counterparts. I would like to encourage people, to ask the questions in the chat. And thanks again, everyone, for presenting this. I think it's kind of a new field for majority of us, so it was very good, to learn about it. As a moderator, I will use the right, to ask the question first. I would like to come back to the Horizon Europe, because I think it's quite important as a major EU research and innovation program. So as I understand, African countries are eligible for funding, and especially the ones who classified as low and middle income countries. Additionally, you mentioned also, Sean, that there is this innovation agenda that promotes research collaboration between Africa and Europe, and there are specific calls under this Horizon Europe. Could you maybe say in which topics or the African countries are mostly interested in, or how for example, partners from Lithuania, from Poland, can get in touch with some kind of African university, and basically propose them, to get on board in the preparation of the project. Perhaps, Sean, is for you this question.
Okay, I can start, but please, colleagues from Arua, feel free to jump in. Yes, Tadas, you're right. All African countries, all organizations based in African countries are automatically eligible for funding. That means that they can sign on to the grant agreement as beneficiaries. They can be active members of the consortium and receive funding directly from Horizon Europe. This is a really straightforward way of collaborating, but one which has generally been a little bit underutilized. We see lots of progress recently with the AU Innovation Agenda, because in a way, the program is now becoming more clearly defined in terms of its collaboration with Africa, even though in theory, any of the calls, apart from some complications in some situations, any of the calls can have an African partner. Mm-hmm. So in terms of getting in touch, you can read the AU Innovation Agenda to get a very clear sense of a 10-year plan for programming between Africa and Europe that can give you a kind of broad outline about calls coming up. You can read the work programs, whether they come out in the from Horizon Europe or from specific partnerships. For example, EDCTP just published their 2025 work program, where you can see in EDCTP as an example, where you can see lots of public health funding calls about infectious diseases and clinical trials. But generally speaking, those kind of four main categories are where you can find different kinds of calls. So one example of a successful project so far that involves many cluster leads, including an Arua, many Arua beneficiaries and a guild coordinator, is a project called Albatross, which is funded under Cluster 6 of Horizon Europe's Pillar 2, and this is about climate adaptation and resilience, and relates to extreme weather and flooding. And so this is a really great example of a shared challenge, where extreme weather flooding is something that's been affecting Italy. It's been in the past, it's been affecting Germany and many parts of the Danube region. It's a similar issue in many parts of Africa as well. And in fact, there's some great shared knowledge that can be done in that. It's already been demonstrated within that consortium. So you can also go onto the funding and tenders portal and click tag. There is a tag for Africa under one of the kind of drop-down menus that can show you the really most specifically dedicated calls for Africa collaboration. I think those are the most important, but I always try to encourage people to not think that that's the only work that they can do, because there's other things that might not be specifically labeled that way.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those tips. I think it was very useful for our participants, to hear where to find the information, because, we live in the information age, and sometimes, there is too much information available, and you really need to know where to reach out, where to look for it. So thanks again. I see another question, which is kind of related to what you were already answering. Which are the opportunities for EU companies and businesses to collaborate on RDI and make partnerships with companies or universities from Africa? Who can try to answer this? As I said, I think partially it was answered already by Sean, just from the other side, not from the university side, but from the business side.
I can jump in for this if you like. I think actually it's really important to bear in mind that everything I was just saying about participation between Africa and Europe, obviously we're a university network and so is Arua. So we're really, we kind of highlight the importance of excellence and these research institutions, but none of this works without participation of private industry. So actually many of the clusters already include kind of non-academic organizations. Clusters are even open to these kinds of organizations joining them. You'd have to contact the co-leads to understand that. But many of these Horizon Europe funded calls require some kind of business or NGO involvement. And indeed, that project I just mentioned does have some non-academic partners involved. So please do get in touch with the researchers, or if there's something that an industry partner, an industry organization is leading on, then they can also find academics to work with them through these initiatives.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Arua network itself, have some connections with the companies and SMEs, in Africa, I believe. And if there is a need, to reach out to some kind of business counterpart, I think also the Arua network would be a good starting point. Am I right?
Yes, you are right, except that it is not fully developed. We are working with a few of them, but we really wish to expand the involvement of business and mainly innovation companies, how to translate research from the lab to development. The link between research and industry is one of the things that we are engaging on actively. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any more questions?
There was a question on how one could participate in our PhD programs.
Yeah, exactly. So the question about the PhD studies and perhaps their availability of funding, that might be also useful for our participants.
Right, okay. So I must say that all the 23 universities in Arua run their own PhD programs. What we are looking at doing is developing the Africa University concept that Emmanuel spoke about with the support of the Guild of European Universities. So we've already initiated a program where we were developing PhD programs around the 21 clusters of research excellence to focus on those areas where there will be partnership between Africa and Europe as far as the training is concerned. That is yet to take off. We're still looking at our funding models, and as soon as we are through with the funding arrangements, then those will be announced. But I just want to assure the person who asked the question that it will not be restricted to people from those universities or those countries. There will be an open call for any student from Africa or of African origin to apply and get into these programs. Even though they'll be delivered within these 23 universities, it will be open to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm still looking at the chat. We still have a few questions actually from the participants who registered to our event. So I would like to address one of them regarding the northern part of Africa. So there was a question, I don't know if one of you can tackle this. Is there any collaboration possibility with universities, for example, from Tunisia and the northern part of Africa? Maybe somebody can say a few words about it.
This is one of the issues that I've always had to battle with. You know, when alliances are created, they are based on, as one may say, a coalition of the willing to work together. So the initial invites that were sent to all the potential collaborators probably did not, I was not around the table at that time, but probably did not receive a lot of interest from Northern Africa. But we are making a lot of efforts to ensure that if we are an African institution, then we must represent the whole of Africa. So last year we managed to bring on board UM6P, Emmanuel, UM6P stands for
Mohammed VI University.
That's in Morocco.
Yes, most Morocco.
We've also made some overtures to universities in Egypt, and we are yet to get the feedback. So it's a gradual process. And one of the things that we also need to bear in mind that is that in many of these alliances, you also need to manage the numbers. If you go beyond a certain number, it becomes very difficult to manage. So one may be accused of being too selective, but that is what alliances are about.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, I mean, we understand, the difficulties of building alliances and attracting people, of course, it's on the free will. So it's difficult to force somebody, to join if there is not the will or, other circumstances. I would like to ask, there is another question, which is quite interesting, actually, how African researchers can have support in proposal preparation. I mean, in general, if there is a support, for example, if you are preparing a tender for the Horizon Europe, and you have special support facilities for research managers. So perhaps maybe John or Emmanuel could say a few words about that.
Well, as part of our capacity building activities, we are developing the whole ecosystem for research management. So from grants management to ethical review processes and the whole gamut of things that you need to get in managing research. So we are strengthening the research capacity, the research management capacity of our member institutions through various initiatives. But in addition to that, our collaboration with the Guild of the European Universities also avail to us opportunities that exist within Europe. So if we want to make a submission to any of the programs that Sean spoke about, we would normally have European collaborators who have the know-how of how to access some of these processes. So that collaboration facilitates our access to these grants opportunities. But beyond that, we are building the capacity of our own institutions.
All right, thank you very much. There is one more question regarding, let's say, because we are coming mostly from eastern certain part of Europe. And so I have a question. I mean, there were a couple of areas mentioned for collaboration, but perhaps, African researchers and innovators might be interested in collaborating in special areas, from Eastern Europe. Are there any specific areas, or are those areas still similar to those that you mentioned before? Yes, please, Sean. I see Sean raising a hand.
I don't know if, I think that we can take a very broad view of this. I think that the Guild's position is that there's no area of excellence that widening countries can't be involved in. So I think that that open mind should be kept by all involved. But I can talk a little bit about which of the clusters have some partners or leaders from widening countries. So I mentioned already that the non-communicable diseases and multimorbidity cluster has a co-leader from Jagiellonian. This is looking at different areas like hypertension, stroke, any area that's not really about infectious diseases, which is an area of huge importance for Europe, of course. It's one that I think is very well understood, but one that's also quite underfunded on the African continent, because there has been a historical focus, quite rightly so, on infectious diseases, but where there's been a lack of resources, non-communicable diseases have had that effect felt more strongly. There are two clusters that focus on kind of natural resources, particularly water. And these have, so one of the clusters focusing on water has Babes-Bolyai University as a partner in a cluster that is co-led by the University of Bern and Addis Ababa University. Then there's another one focused on water that has Ljubljana as a co-lead, and their equal partners are in South Africa, are Rhodes University, if I don't remember, if I haven't gotten that wrong, And so that you can see there's another example of a leadership role with quite a broad variety of academics on both continents working on that. And we've also see Ljubljana is involved in a few other clusters, particularly sustainable food systems, artificial intelligence, and engineering for the future. So, of course, this is not something that's static. It can change, and there's plenty of opportunities for others. But you can see there that there's a few different topics that widening country organizations have been involved in.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those examples. I still see one question. Yes, Sorsoya has. If I understood, we all clusters are open for collaboration, so non-guild member organization can join them. Is it right?
Yes, that's the case. So the clusters have non-guild members. They have non-ARUA members. It was from the very beginning very important that they should be inclusive. You can join a cluster. That's something that will be discussed with a co-lead, with the co-leads and the broader members of the cluster, and that's something that's their decision. Of course, ARUA and the guild kind of keep information about who to keep up to date with our clusters, but also you can collaborate without having to come into a formal partnership in the cluster. So it can also be a relatively informal way of contacting partners so that you can work on specific projects as well.
Thanks for clarifying that. One last question in the chat, very practical one. So if somebody wants to cooperate with an ARUA member, should they reach out, to them directly, or via ARUA? How it would work in practice?
Well, I think the partnership issues that evolve along with time. If you want to collaborate with University of Ghana, you don't have to come through ARUA. I mean, University of Ghana is an independent university, and you can contact them and do anything you want to do. Same with Makerere or Cape Town or Rwanda or any of these universities that are in this network. They still go ahead with their regular partnerships and collaborations. What people might be interested in is these clusters of research excellence that we are working on. And that is what Sean was saying, that if you were interested in collaborating or partnering with us in any of these initiatives, then the process he showed you is what you have to go through. But if you want to work with University of Cape Town, you don't need to go through ARUA.
All right. Thank you very much. I think it was useful for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chat, and I don't see any more really burning questions. So I guess we have reached the end of today's seminar, and I want to thank all our speakers and participants for their valuable insights and engagement. So the discussion has highlighted many opportunities, I guess, for the collaboration under Horizon Europe and beyond. And I think, now it's the time, to put this in practice, our own knowledge. So I would like to encourage everyone to stay connected, explore potential opportunities for the projects, and continue the dialogue. And if you have some further questions or ideas, so feel free to reach out to us, to organizers, to the speakers. I'm sure, you're going to find the answers. And thank you once again for your participation. And we look forward to seeing you at our future events. So thanks.